The carriage that stopped outside the cottage that morning bore a crest Margaret didn't recognize, and a man who stepped down looking at the 3 children playing in the yard as though he already knew their names. She would spend the next hour learning exactly why. She had been hanging washing on the line when she first heard the wheels on the lane, the unmistakable sound of a carriage far too fine for their quiet corner of Hampshire. Margaret's first thought was practical, almost automatic after 4 years of managing every crisis alone. Which of the children had done something to warrant a visit from the magistrate? Her second thought, sharper and colder, was that something had happened to one of the few relatives who still occasionally wrote to check whether they were all still alive. She had not expected a stranger. He was tall, dressed with the unmistakable severity of a man who had never once in his life worried about the cost of a coat, and he stood very still at the garden gate, his gaze moving slowly over the 3 children chasing each other around the yard. Thomas, 8, quick and loud, and 6, solemn and watchful, and little Peter, 4, who had never known his mother at all. "Forgive the intrusion," the man said, when Margaret finally set down the washing basket and approached the gate, wiping her hands on her apron with more composure than she felt. "I am looking for the family of the late Mrs. Catherine Ellery." Margaret's chest tightened. No one had spoken her sister's married name aloud in years, not since the fever had taken Catherine and left Margaret, unmarried and 24 at the time, the only relative willing to take in 3 grieving children rather than see them scattered to whatever charitable arrangement the parish could manage. "I'm her sister," Margaret said carefully. "These are her children. May I ask who's asking?" The man's eyes moved to the children once more, and something in his expression, a controlled, careful kind of grief, made Margaret's instincts sharpen further. "My name is Julian Ashworth," he said. "I believe I am their father." She did not invite him in immediately. For years of protecting 3 children from a world that had shown them very little kindness had taught Margaret to be careful with strangers bearing sudden, life-altering claims, however finely dressed they arrived. "Catherine's husband died before Peter was born," she said. "A carriage accident, we were told. There was a funeral. A grave, even though I understand now it was empty, since the body was never fully recovered." "There was no accident," Julian said quietly. "There was a lie constructed by my own family to separate me from a woman they considered beneath my station, and from children they never intended to acknowledge." Margaret felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Explain." He did, haltingly at first. Then, with the practiced precision of a man who had spent years rehearsing an explanation he'd never expected the chance to give. He had loved Catherine, he said, in secret, knowing his family would never accept a match with a woman of no fortune and no family name worth mentioning. When Catherine had written to tell him she was carrying his 3rd child, his father had intervened, bribing officials, staging an accident, and sending Julian abroad under circumstances designed to make any return, any correction of the lie, effectively impossible for years. "I only learned the truth 8 months ago," he said. "My father's death forced an accounting of debts and deceptions I hadn't known existed. Catherine's last letter to me, informing me I had a 3rd child, and that she was ill, and that she was afraid of what would happen to all 3 of them if anything happened to her." Margaret's hands had gone very still on the gate. "She never told me any of this. She let me believe you were dead. I imagine," Julian said, his voice rough, "that she believed it herself by the end. My father was very thorough." Margaret invited him in, finally, not because she trusted him, but because the children had noticed the stranger and abandoned their game, drifting closer with the open curiosity of children and used to visitors. Thomas, bold as always, asked directly whether the man was lost, and studied him with the same watchful suspicion Margaret herself felt. Peter, too young to understand any of it, simply asked if the fine carriage horse had a name. Julian answered each question with a gentleness that surprised Margaret, crouching to Peter's level, admitting honestly to Thomas that he was not lost but had been searching for them for a long time, telling Anne, when she asked bluntly who he was, that he would explain everything to their aunt first, and trust her to decide what they were ready to hear. It was, Margaret thought, watching him, the first time in 4 years anyone had deferred to her judgment about the children rather than offering unsolicited opinions about how she ought to be raising them. Inside the small cottage, over tea she hadn't intended to offer but found herself making anyway, Julian laid out what he had come to propose. Not, as Margaret had half expected and fully dreaded, a demand to remove the children from the only home and mother figure they had ever known, but something far more complicated. "I have no wish to tear them from you," he said. "You have raised them, clearly, with more care and stability than my own family ever offered me. I have no intention of undoing that, but I have resources, considerable ones, that could ensure they never want for anything: education, opportunity, a name that opens doors rather than closes them. I would like to be part of their lives, in whatever capacity you believe is best for them. And I would like to understand what the last 4 years have cost you, since it's clear no one has ever properly asked." Margaret set down her teacup with more force than she intended. "No one has asked me that in 4 years, my lord." "Then I am asking now," she told him, because something about his careful, deliberate honesty made deflection feel unnecessary. She told him about the marriage proposal she had quietly declined 2 years earlier, from a perfectly kind man who had made clear, without ever saying so directly, that he had little interest in raising another man's children. She told him about the small savings she had spent down to almost nothing, about the sleepless nights nursing Peter through a fever that had nearly taken him too, about the particular, invisible exhaustion of being essential to 3 children's survival while remaining, in the eyes of the wider world, merely an unmarried aunt who had done what any decent woman would do. "I don't say any of this for sympathy," she added, when she noticed the stricken look on his face. "I say it because you asked, and because I find I'm tired of pretending it cost nothing." "It should never have cost you this much," Julian said. "None of it should have fallen entirely to you. But it did, and I would do every bit of it again, because they are not a burden to me, my lord, whatever anyone else assumed when they saw an unmarried woman taking in her dead sister's children. They are the only family I have left." Julian was quiet for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away, and didn't. "Then perhaps," he said slowly, "the question isn't how I take them from you. Perhaps it's how I might support the family you've already built, in whatever form makes sense to you, as their father, if you'll permit it, and as something more to you, if you would ever consider it." The proposal, when it came weeks later, was neither swift nor careless. Julian visited regularly through the following month, always announced, always deferring to Margaret's judgment about how much time the children should spend with him, how quickly they should be told the truth about who he was. He brought Thomas books on the natural sciences the boy had shown a passion for. He sat patiently through Anne's long, solemn explanations of her drawings. He held Peter without any of the awkward stiffness Margaret had half expected from a man of his station, and used to children. And gradually, in quiet conversations after the children had gone to bed, he asked Margaret about her own life, not merely as the children's guardian, but as a woman who had once had plans of her own, interrupted by grief and duty, never once resented for it but never acknowledged either. "What did you want before Catherine died?" he asked her one evening, as they sat by the small fire in the cottage's front room. Margaret considered the question longer than she expected to need. "I wanted very ordinary things, a household of my own eventually, perhaps children, though I hadn't imagined it happening quite this way." She smiled faintly. "I stopped asking myself the question honestly somewhere in the first exhausted year. It felt like an indulgence I couldn't afford. It shouldn't have felt that way." "No," she agreed, "but grief rarely consults what should be." Julian reached over, taking her hand with a gentleness that felt entirely unlike the careful, formal distance he'd maintained during his first visit. "I cannot undo 4 years of a life spent entirely in service to children who deserved a father who was actually present. But I would like to spend whatever years remain making certain you never again believe your own life is an indulgence you can't afford. Marry me, Margaret, not merely to give the children a settled name, though I want that for them. Marry me because I have watched you these past weeks and found, to my own considerable surprise, that I want a partner who already knows what real sacrifice looks like, and would still choose it." Margaret did not answer immediately. She thought of the marriage proposal she had declined 2 years earlier, the quiet, resigned understanding she had built with herself that her own wants had become permanently secondary to the children's needs. She thought of 4 years of being seen by the wider world as merely useful, the sister who had done her duty, praised occasionally, but never truly asked what any of it had cost her, until a stranger with a title and a guilty family history had sat across from her and simply asked. "The children come first," she said finally. "In everything. Always. I would never ask otherwise," Julian said. "They are, after all, the reason I found you at all. I have no wish to diminish that. And I want it understood before I answer that I am not accepting because you can offer them more than I can. I've managed for 4 years without your resources, and I would have managed for 40 more if that was what it required." "I know," Julian said, and something in his voice, quiet, entirely without the performative gallantry she might have expected from a man of his station, convinced her more thoroughly than any grander declaration could have. "It's precisely why I'm asking." Margaret looked at him for a long moment, weighing 4 years of exhausted, unacknowledged sacrifice against the quiet, steady offer in front of her. Not a rescue, she understood now, but a partnership, extended to a woman he had watched build an entire life out of duty and never once complain of the cost. "Yes," she said, "I'll marry you." The wedding took place quietly, the following spring, with Thomas serving as an exceptionally serious witness, and insisting on choosing the flowers herself, and Peter falling asleep during the ceremony itself, curled against Margaret's skirts. Word eventually spread through the wider family and the small Hampshire town where Margaret had spent 4 invisible years, not of scandal, as some had clearly hoped, but of a quiet, thorough vindication. The unmarried aunt who had sacrificed everything for her sister's children had not, in the end, sacrificed her own chance at happiness. She had simply waited, without knowing she was waiting, for someone willing to ask what the sacrifice had actually cost her. Margaret never forgot the 4 years that came before. The sleepless nights, the small savings spent down to nothing, the quiet loneliness of being praised for her duty while never once being asked what she herself might have wanted. But she carried the memory now not as a wound, but as proof of exactly what she was capable of, long before anyone had thought to notice. If Margaret's story reminded you that real strength often goes unnoticed until someone finally stops to ask what it cost, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next story. Tell me in the comments, has anyone in your life ever sacrificed everything quietly, without ever being properly thanked for it? Share this video with someone who deserves to know their sacrifice was never invisible to everyone.